Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blockbusters podcast. I'm Daniel. I've been with MarketAcross for a long time, and I'm here today with Liam Kelly, who I've been working with since the beginning, and he's one of the most esteemed journalists in the space. And very excited to have him here today. Very excited to hear some insights from him.
Well, thanks for having me, Daniel. And yeah, thanks. A nice intro. One of the more esteemed journalists in crypto. I think there's like maybe 17 other journalists in crypto at the moment. So it's a small pool, but yeah, happy to be among the top 17, I suppose. But yeah, great to be here. I'm a DeFi correspondent at DLNews. I've been there for almost 2 years now, and yeah, I've been in the space writing about digital coins since all the way back in 2017.
Yeah, a long time. Which you know, of course, the people who will tell you they've been in crypto for a long time, and you ask them, "Oh, really? Since when?" And they'll say October. So you're like one of those people that's actually been here, which is cool.
Yeah, but I'm unfortunately not mega wealthy yet, so I've clearly made some kind of misstep, at least according to my close friends and family.
We still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's jump right in. Let's start. Let's start with what brought you in 2017 into crypto journalism. What were the first steps? What made you come over to the dark side, as we say?
So I was thinking about this question. I got a few questions from Daniel, just kind of to break the fourth wall. A few questions from Daniel ahead of time, and I was thinking about this question, and I was thinking about inventing a completely false answer for the sake of the audience, but I won't. And this because the story is relatively straightforward. I was working as an English teacher, and I was also freelancing as a journalist in France and in Germany, primarily writing about art, culture, clean technologies, environmentalism stuff, just trying to get my name out there, that sort of thing. And I started getting a bit of work to write about cryptocurrencies. And what was unusual about this work, I suppose, or what kind of maybe attracted to me was that it paid you in Bitcoin, right? That was sort of the conditions. And I thought, what a fun thing to do in your 20s, I was paid in Bitcoin to write stories and that sort of thing. But at the time, it was sort of like end of 2016, 2017, and that was sort of there was this big run up at that time too. So what ended up happening is that there began to be more and more work in the way of covering the industry, at least with a critical eye. And so at a certain point, I was able to just sort of cast aside my other obligations. Not my family. I didn't leave my family, but there's a line, and I'm willing to toe the line, but there are limits certainly, and sort of dove in, as we say, or plunge, or took the leap. I think there are a few expressions that are used for this sort of event in one's life, but that was what happened, and that's why it happened. Here I am, sort of trapped on the internet, or I guess these days I think people call it on chain, and hunting things down, either bad guys or typically funny guys. I look for a lot of funny guys in my coverage as well. But yeah, that's the story. That's how I got into this.
It's good. I know you said you weren't going to make anything up, and it came out. And sorry, I'm in no position to say whether it's good or bad, but
you are, Daniel.
But I liked it. I liked it a lot. I know there's a lot of people in the industry that you're not sure if they got into crypto on purpose or not. A lot of people just kind of ended up. But it sounds like you had the interest in the being involved in the Bitcoin world, at least back in the day, which is cool.
Yeah. I would say it's it was an initial interest that kind of snowballed into a legitimate interest. But the legitimate interest is now a lot more complex and what the heck is Bitcoin? It's more like being among so many different kinds of unusual people that typically I, at least previously, had never really encountered, is kind of what kind of fuels a lot of this. It's a real slice of life, I would say.
Yeah. I actually came from a more traditional tech background also, and it's just I know it's a big cliche to call crypto the Wild West, but it totally feels like that. It's it's much more dynamic and much more like you said, I know you were kind of tongue in cheek to say there are only 17 esteemed journalists, but it's like if you go to a conference, if you go to two conferences, like you already start to see kind of the same people, and it's like a smaller, very dynamic, very exciting community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yay! Let's get a little bit more into the world of journalism, which is of course like your expertise. Let's start with DLNews. I know you're representing like one of the top publications. We can call it the top publications in the space. And you know, again, not my place to say, but plenty of very, very, very respectable work out there. What would you say is your like core mission as DLNews, or as a correspondent for DLNews?
Yeah, I think at DLNews is to kind of have a sort of crypto native critical view of the industry, right? So I think what I mean by that is sort of, you know, it's not all money laundering, it's not all scams, it's not all hacks. Those are all a huge portion of the industry, and they play their role, and there are stories to be told there for sure. But I think also, you know, something that's maybe a little bit uncovered is like sort of these, you know, well-funded, well-capitalized, sort of mid-sized crypto organizations that maybe don't get the same kind of scrutiny as, say, a Binance or a Coinbase or even a Tether, just because, you know, they aren't the biggest, right? And I think as this kind of industry has evolved, we've seen, especially like this year, right? You have, you know, larger publications coming into this space and covering, doing excellent work as well, covering this space. There is a little bit of a gap that I think at DLNews we're trying to kind of fill and occupy, is covering sort of critically these kind of smaller, you know, or smaller is hard, maybe less well known perhaps, protocols and projects.
Okay, smaller is, it's not an insult.
Yeah. That's one way to think about it for sure. It depends a lot on what they're doing, certainly too, and critical in the sense that not that everything we say is going to be negative naturally, but critical in the sense that we're trying to have sort of an unwavering neutral eye for what exactly is happening. You know, if you think about a lot of these projects, right, especially in a global system like this, there are real investors who have real things at stake, and they might not all be with the biggest projects, right? So you can develop, just from a media business perspective, you can develop a pretty large audience by covering these protocols with, you know, sort of the sincerity and clarity that you would any other protocol. So I think at DLNews we try and keep we give a lot of room to that sort of thing, because it gets left off the shelves, I think, at, you know, a Wall Street Journal or New York Times, and at the same time, I think for other crypto native publications, it's, you know, it's not so fawning either, and I think that there's a real need for that type of coverage at that sort of scale, if that makes sense. So I mean, that's kind of a rambly way to say it, and maybe our EIC will bang me over the head for kind of explaining that as our mission, but that's how I think about it when I go about my work, essentially.
Would you think it's fair to say that you guys like are? I mean, of course, in addition, like it's not to say that you won't write about the Coinbases or the Binances or the Tethers, but it's to say that there's someone that needs to be the champion of kind of the more underdog companies or the lesser known companies, without just being like, oh, hey, come on in, we'll write about you. Like, but someone who will at least look at them and investigate and see what they're doing.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the term champion. I don't think that would be the right word for this sort of thing. But yeah, I would say like we have perhaps maybe a wider scope, or a scope of interest that's maybe a little bit more focused on, you know, stuff that's a little bit below the fold, right? But to your point, yeah, we still cover Coinbase. Obviously, we still cover Binance and Tether and all the big players and that sort of thing, as well as, you know, sort of the traditional players like a Revolut or Robinhood that are kind of creeping into crypto too. That's a great story. But I think we have a lot of time to take a really close look at some of the, you know, maybe lesser known names, at least to a mainstream reader, right? You know, crypto readers are like very keen to know about what's happening in their backyard, and they're not going to get that coverage, I don't think, from you know, a larger news outlet. So I think there's a lot to be said about, you know, building an audience there. When you do come
across like one of these stories, let's say, or companies, what would you say is like, do you have any immediate kind of red flags that are like, oh, okay, this is more of a, or on the flip side, this is worth diving into. As I always like to think about it, I imagine like Liam showing up, he's got his full plate of work all day.
I'm ready.
He's like, he's going out hunting for lunch. What is going to get him to put down the blade and investigate the story and like go into something that has like just come across his desk? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I wish there would be.
Right, again, like what's going to make you go, sorry, I have hunting to do. I don't have time.
They're a wild boar to be, plotted after. I do live across the street from a large park, and there have been boar sighting here, along with lots of foxes. But I guess to the point of like what makes me move towards a story, it's like I wish I had like this like system, like, oh yeah, the system's activated, here we go, let's go through the steps, and like the conditions were met, so the system is activated, and here I go, right? And it's like not necessarily like that too, like whether I like it or not, there's like a constraint of time and energy and like bandwidth on stuff, so you have to kind of prioritize resources, you know what I mean, and like what other people in my newsroom are also working on, you know what I mean? And so like to try and figure out whether a story is a story, it depends on like so many different factors that are kind of constantly changing. But I do think that there is like kind of a core, a couple of core principles that you can kind of maybe, I try and keep top of mind when looking at a story. So like typically like press releases and stuff, doing a pure story on a press release, like the bar for that to be just converted straight into a story, is pretty high. I don't want to say you're just doing marketing for somebody, but there's like that information is maybe like of the rung of information available to you is maybe the least valuable because it's going to be the most ubiquitous, right? And you want stuff that like back to like running a media business or what a media business is supposed to do, like the bread and butter of this is like, or meat and potatoes or, steak and broccoli. I don't know what you typically eat, Daniel. You look like just heavy potatoes. Heavy potatoes.
Just potatoes. Strict potatoes. Sometimes I'll have a sweet potato if I'm feeling crazy with my bad self. But potatoes, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah, I figured you're a prime potato eater. So let's just say in terms of like,
fried potatoes.
Your prime potato kind of thing for running a media business is you want stories at your site that no one else has, right? So like that, like you want not just like, I'm not talking about just like scoops or exclusives. You want stuff that has like a unique angle or original angle that people aren't going to get anywhere else. And that's why they come to your site, right? So if you're rewriting stuff that's been broken by Bloomberg or like other, outlets, whether they're like, direct competitors, be it CoinDesk. I mean, everyone's doing great work. That's what I mean to say, but like, you really want to make sure that like, can I write about this again in a new and interesting way? Is there something here that, I have insight into that maybe the market or readers or other publications haven't identified either, right? And if that's the case, the steps it takes for me to turn that into a story or want to turn that into a story are like far fewer, right? Like, there's I would be more inclined to do something like that because if my bottom line or like kind of how I make my salary and whatnot is like trying to do stories like that, and so on like any given day that might be different depending on the kind of tip or pitch or something that kind of comes across my way.
And you've actually said very clearly, you're like, and I think about this all the time, like
nice. I like
know
to live
that
in your
sounds
house.
like a joke. Like while I'm brushing my teeth, while I'm living my life, I'll never. You even used like a visual for me, which is great. You said like a press release is like good in and of itself, but I'm paraphrasing here quite liberally. But it's like the idea is to try to tie it into like a bigger narrative or a broader narrative. Like if a pitch, and of course correct me if I'm wrong here or if I'm remembering incorrectly, but if a pitch, let's say it is with a press release. If the pitch ties into like a broader narrative, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there, let's say stable coins, for example, or Bitcoin, like things that people are actually talking about. If this press release provides like a unique angle or a sneak peek into those worlds, and it actually ties into those worlds in a helpful way, then it can be like a stepping stone into a bigger story. But like you said, it's not necessarily a oh cool, let me just let me just rewrite the press release, for example.
Yeah. Don't want to.
That's
Yeah, you don't want
more
to.
common.
Yeah, you don't want to. I mean, you typically want to avoid that unless you got an editor breathing down your neck looking for copy. In which case, then you might be a little bit more liberal in what you end up writing. But fortunately enough, that's not usually the case at at DLNews, which is really nice. And I guess maybe to bring another example, and it's like. There was a recent announcement with Crypto.com, which I know is one of MA's clients. Pitched me on. We're doing a sports prediction market with Crypto.com. We have this new partnership, and we sort of like the pitch was one thing, but I wanted to talk to Crypto.com's sort of head of product for that particular feature because. As you know, there's all these kind of lawsuits and there's this like legal disputes happening in the United States around prediction markets and. I just wanted to talk to him basically about that. And you had this little news peg perhaps to kind of hang it on and to kind of, get that interview. But the story that ended up, manifesting from that initial, pitch was completely different actually than I think laid out. And I think that's sort of like, it's the point of like how PR and journalists can kind of, work together to make a story that is actually, it's not like meaningful to either party, but it's like meaningful to an audience. You know what I mean? Like people would want to read that sort of thing. And that's kind of like, that's the best of both worlds. That's where, you get these things that kind of come together in a really, really nice way. So that's like another way to maybe think about sort of the work that, we do or can do together, Mostly it's me just telling you, no, please leave me alone, Daniel.
A no is also like is better than a no response while you're hunting. I know that happens a lot.
Yeah, that's true.
But so there is a world where it's like much more common than proper press release pitch. It's much more of like ideally a collaborative process with the audience in mind as far as like the end story goes.
Yeah, I'm like
a much better way of thinking about it.
Yeah. Like in the purest sense, in sort of the ontological sense of what I'm supposed to do, I'm like a conduit of unique information to a wider audience. And like I as long as I can do that sort of thing, it's I wouldn't say it doesn't matter how I get that information. Obviously there are limits and stuff, legal and otherwise. But like there, you know what I mean, like. But like that's what I'm trying to do. You know what I mean? It's just to kind of like funnel this stuff and shape it to everyone else.
My next question, building up to it, is like the biggest mistakes that PR people or anyone that pitches you kind of makes, because I think there is something to be said about exactly like you mentioned. I know we spoke about it a bit yesterday, where it's like there's the collaboration ultimately leads to like a better story. If there is a way we can help, it could even be like, I know this happens sometimes too, where you're like, hey, I'm working on a story about XYZ. Is there someone that can help? Or is there someone I can talk to? Or you have specific questions? And again, even then, it's not to say that like the person that you talk to will immediately be incorporated in the story, but it's like, I guess that's part of the process of like sounding out or not sounding out information, but going out and actually getting the information that you need to round out your story.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Because like, I'm sure you probably get hassled by clients too. Like, oh, I just had a call with this journalist. When's my front page story kind of thing? And like sometimes that's the case. There, they've said something that was like just so intuitive and so interesting that I'd never heard before that it was enough to hang a whole story on. But like that's kind of like the home run situation, right? That doesn't really happen. I want that to happen every time. I want every call that I have to have a story at the end of it. You know what I mean? But sometimes that's not the case. But sometimes what happens is like over time, you're making your rounds, you're calling your people, and you're talking to new individuals and stuff like that, and you kind of get, you gather maybe a multi-sourced item that's sort of like this is some people are talking about this thing quite regularly, and it's an emerging subject you should be maybe mindful of and like bits and pieces of different people that you've spoken with over a week or so that you kind of incorporate to sustain that thesis, right? But one call, it doesn't equal one story. Rarely is the case, in fact, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, except for after this call, you're going to go up and write up everything I said. You're like,
what I'm gonna do, Daniel, after this call is I'm gonna go into my studio, my oil canvas painting studio, I'm going to paint just a graphic picture of you, of your face.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
No, that's cool. I had a follow up, but I forgot. Like as you were talking, and then I forgot because I'm a silly boy. I try to do this thing where I listen until the last word is spoken instead of trying to like formulate a response while you're talking.
Thanks for telling me how your mind works.
Oh, I remember. I was gonna say I often do. By the way, if we're talking about clients and stuff, I often do tell them like. I try to draw the distinction between like the client's audience, you know, whether it's blog or social or people that are following them, and DLNews' audience, for example, because there is often, if not almost always, a distinction. And so the question is like, how do we help the DLNews audience as opposed to just our own audience? That's like kind of the difference between marketing and news. Even though I know it's like a square rectangle situation, but we work in the news business, where like a rectangle is a square, but a rectangle or a square is not a rectangle, or vice versa. I think it is. Anyways, cool. Let me point the gun at myself for a sec and ask you what I know. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but if we can just kind of crystallize a bit of our like recent points into the single biggest mistake that crypto founders or PR agencies make while pitching you.
Yeah, I don't know if there's like a big like single. I mean, obviously the biggest single mistake would be like, here's news and you run it and it's like actually everything in that news is not real. That would be bad, right? Like that's not really happened before, but I think we can probably all agree that like doing something along those lines is bad, and it puts everyone in a really shitty position. I think first ever, best of, all time, that kind of language is like, I see that language and I'm like, I gotta go look all this shit up, I gotta see if they're talking, about things that are real.
It's actually the first time.
Yeah, exactly. Like that kind of
specific. It's like the first time that this happened on this day under these conditions, sort of thing.
Yeah, like that kind of stuff too. I mean, I think also, tiered embargoes, that kind of thing. I think, maybe people in the media world, or crypto media world at least, are aware that, DLNews were pretty, when it comes to embargoes, we're like, embargoes are a complicated, like, sort of media product. They're so mediated, right? They're like so, the whole thing is orchestrated, accordingly. And then, sometimes what can happen is like, one media outlet gets, can run the story at like 10 a.m. Eastern, right? And then, but everyone else gets the notice, this story's going live at 11 a.m. Eastern, right? And so then, there's like, I can't imagine it being pleasant for anybody, right? Because the PR person who's kind of set up this tiered embargoes, then suddenly at 10 a.m. going to get all this, inbound from other journalists like, hey, did they break the embargo? Like, what's going on? And that kind of thing. And they're like, oh no, we've got them the exclusive, you can run your story as you wish, sorry about that, there was a miscommunication, and like, and vice versa too, like, as a media outlet, if you like step in it and you mistake the embargo too, like it's a whole shit show too. And like the whole thing, like at the end, if you imagine an embargo story going out smoothly, like typically nothing happens. Typically no one, a couple people read it, but typically nothing happens. There's just like this web of coverage, and I think the people who are like, oh, this was such a good move is like the client. It's like, oh yeah, we got Twitter threads from KOLs, we got like, coverage in a mainstream publication, we got coverage in like a tier 1 crypto publication, you know what I mean? Like, and they're like, this is an awesome product launch or something like that, And like, as a journalist, like, we participated in marketing. Like that's kind of like what it comes down to. We got like, 1,000 views on a piece, and carry on with your Tuesday. And does anyone know anything more than they did before? I don't know. Do we feel good about ourselves? Perhaps. I mean, I don't ever feel good about myself, but like in those cases,
how do we do that?
In terms of red flags, it's like a complicated thing. I wouldn't say that it can be boiled down to that sort of thing. And maybe to your point about this, like just trying to imagine, how a story. Oh Jesus. How a story sort of comes to be, like make sure your pitch has, is attached to a larger context, right? But like, if you think about where journalists are like in this like upper context narrative thing, right? So like, that's where they are. They're watching their stories. They're thinking about their things, and if you can like splice something in really seamlessly, like obviously that's really, really helpful, but that's also quite difficult because you can't know like the things I'm reading or a journalist is reading at any given moment. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's complicated. And I guess the way I think about a lot of this stuff is like, it's this framework that is a relationship that you talk and you have a very fluid back and forth about a thing, and maybe there's a story there, but just like as I do with any of my sources, a PR person or a FLAC is like, a source just like any other, and stories are to be sussed out, via, kind of the messiness of a conversation or a call or, that kind of thing. It's rarely this like, here's a piece of paper that we have written in accordance with a company, news, take the news, it's usually not really the case. At least in my experience, my limited experience.
No, it makes perfect sense. I'm wondering if then like transparency or openness becomes like one of the best traits that you can have. Is kind of like a PR person or a company or a founder or something. Someone's that's like not just like, hey, here's the news, but someone that's like, hey, here's, or at some point they have to have their news in there somewhere, I guess, as like you said, as like some kind of hook. But also like what else they can offer, maybe whether it's a completely open conversation about it, or commentary about A, B, and C topics. Like it's more of like this fluid introduction of themselves as a person or of their company as a concept, as opposed to like, hey, will you publish this tomorrow? Which, by the way, we never even talked about the timing of embargoes, like whether or not it's in 2 weeks or whether it's in 10 minutes.
An embargo. If someone sends me an embargo like that's going out in 10 minutes, it's like, thank you for letting us know we were at the bottom of your list. No, thank you. I understand we are very unimportant to this, so thank you for flagging that, and hopefully. Next time we go up the list and you let us know an hour in advance, perhaps, that kind of thing.
A boy can dream.
A boy can dream. Yeah. I have nightmares mostly.
Just because there's like the element of a story that everyone kind of covers. Is there a level of story where you're like, you have to cover it because, and I'm not saying like an embargo or whatever, it's just like something that happened. Let's say it's like something was posted on Twitter. We don't have to get political here, it doesn't, but just like Trump signed a whatever executive order, Bitcoin strategic reserve or something crazy, I don't know. But like, that might be like too far gone, but like, is there a level of story where you're like, okay, yes, everyone covered it, but we also need to cover it just because it's like one of those stories sort of thing?
Yeah. That's a great question. But yeah, like every newsroom has their bar where it's like, yeah, this is no matter what we think about how precious each of our stories are, this one we need to have on our site for our readers, right? And I think the best example is obviously like the collapse of FTX and all the excellent reporting that CoinDesk did during that period as well, and outpacing tons of other mainstream journalists and outlets on that. We were happy to give tons of coverage to that, following a lot of what they were doing because they were crushing it, right? And like all that a lot of that information that they were reporting on was super valuable to our readers. At the time, I wasn't at DLNews, but the previous outlet I was at, that was all very critical news, and it also helped kind of form the basis of where we could take the story next too. So there's like stories that kind of meet this bar where it's like, yeah, you got to cover it. It's, the name's too big, the calamity is too expansive, this, that, and the other. We got to have something on the site about this. Insofar as there's this like phrase, you plant a flag. You've got your first foot in the door. And then once this kind of, not necessarily the dust settles, but once you kind of have a grasp of the story, it's like, then you can kind of do your DLNews take on the event. Then you can get, some people to go on chain, have a look at certain transactions, for instance, look at some more of the technical details, perhaps say of an event, and then also reach out to, our exclusive Rolodex of contacts who we've built over the years and that sort of thing, and come to us with different insights on one specific event. And so then once that you have that kind of initial story that breaks, everything kind of coming after that takes on its own life as a newsroom, be it here or elsewhere, begins to apply its own sort of thinking behind how the coverage should develop, and where we think that our readers are, and trying to meet them there, or try and point them in the next direction where we think like maybe a story is going to go. But yeah, there's plenty of times, especially in crypto, right? Like it's so crash and bang sometimes, like that you just got to have something up on a specific item, and I think I'm of the mind, personally, that there is an objective bar of when a story is like, you got to write it. But every newsroom kind of, sets that bar themselves. And that's why, newsrooms are such an exciting, I like, for instance, I know we're kind of a little off topic, but I love being in a newsroom just because I love chatting with other journalists about, the world falling, or, the next gravy train, or, or also saying like, this isn't worth a story, this is, and if it is worth a story, this is how we should cover it. And just kind of like chopping along until you get this, like, so many times we'll be working with like 3 or 4 different people on something about how a story should be covered, and like after the first draft or in edits and that kind of thing, and then the story eventually comes out, and it's just this like, it's just delectable, it's just this excellent piece of journalism that everyone sort of looks at, and it's like, yeah, it was a heated discussion, and like we had like a pretty intense chat over a long period of time. And we could have just pushed the story out, you know what I mean? But I'm glad we all took the time to kind of, influence this story, because we have something here that no one else has, and it's like kind of a, publication defining type of story, and that's like, that's what it's all about, man. Like that's what you want to be doing. You can't obviously do that every time, but like. That's what makes a lot of these things so fun, is just that collaboration that can happen, especially around like a big industry shaking event, be it FTX, FTX or Terra, that sort of thing. Like, I mean, there's a ton of these implosions,
really
right?
Time. Yeah, that was a really good time to be in our industry.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's another thing too. Like, the best time to be a journalist is when, like, it's going to the moon, and then when it's like cratering, but anything in this middle period where it's just like middling, that's where like, there's like so little friction. People are like jaded or apathetic, or, there's nothing really happening. That's kind of where, like a shark, if it stops moving, it dies. It's like where journalists kind of like, run out of things, and then you're working on other stuff. I don't know.
Well, because it's also like what in those times. Of course, we don't have like access to like DLNews website traffic or like statistics or whatever, but it's like, I know traditionally at least Google search volume and like YouTube views and Twitter views and stuff, like in these middle times, like go down significantly. So it's like, I guess from the audience perspective also, it's like people's attention like comes in and out with like the excitement or with the opposite of excitement.
Yeah. It's all like, I mean, you can pretty much intuit a lot of this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, just based on your own human attention span of what you're gonna, read about. Like, if you're like, if your 401k is just halved, you'll want to maybe know why that's happened. Either your financial advisor has just rugged you, which would be especially bad, or
happened in crypto.
Yeah. I mean, I'm speaking more, people who are like. Or is like some, has Trump tweeted something about, like some tariff thing, like getting that information, is this a bad situation, or is this a really bad situation? That's like a question I think humans are like constantly asking themselves,
Yeah, I mean, the first thing we do is like we open, well, I don't know about everyone, but the first thing I do is like I open the news. How bad is it? Exactly like you said. And so you guys really do have like a big responsibility as you're drawing out, to the audience, like how am I gonna break this to them? That's cool.
I guess it's cool. It's also it's kind of can be super disheartening. I mean, learning that someone has just stolen a bunch of people's money and being the first to report on it, it's like kind of harrowing, right? But it's like there is like there's a sort of vocational duty, I would argue. Maybe that's too romantic, but to kind of bring that news with the same intensity of care as you would any other story, and being careful of all the things that, all the people certainly that are involved with like this actual, calamity and tragic event,
Do people ever take it out on you? Like, do they like shoot the messenger type thing? Like if you post one of these like more tough stories to break, like do people ever come like keyboard warrioring?
Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, social media is like, that's what it's like. I feel like that's what like at least X or is like kind of designed to do, was like to amplify that sort of thing. And like I personally, I find it like that component of the job like deeply stressful. Like I hate reading people who are really angry with me, and yet I often find myself like dealing with that, you know what I mean? And being like, and like talking to people like, oh no, it's cool. Like Charles Hoskins is super angry with me, and so are all of like these Cardano hordes of people, and like, it's water, it's like water off my back, it's all good. And like, I just know deep down, my weekend is fucking ruined. Like I'm at like my garden house, I'm like planting tulips, and like, I'm just not there anymore. I'm just like, damn,
Like,
this dude.
your mind is somewhere else.
Yeah. Like, I'm like barbecuing sausages. I've got a beer in one hand. I'm just like, outside. This is sick. I love it. And deep down, I'm just like, I'm so anxious right now. I'm like so anxious. My body physically hurts. Like I don't think I'll eat for the next 3 days. You know what I mean? But on the outside, I'm just like, it's part of the job. Knock one back.
I'm a rock star.
Yeah, but deep down I know it's like, damn.
This is the life. Jeez, that's crazy. I never realized there was like, until now, I never even thought that it can have like such a like dark, there's like a dark side. There really is. Which I know kind of brings us full circle here, but that's wild. I'm sorry to hear. And also if you need me to I don't know, I can.
Don't say something weird.
Bully people.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
I know we're kind of out of time, and I want to be respectful of your time. I know you have I know you have a busy schedule. So we'll just ask one more kind of question.
And then I have a question for you at the end, okay?
Yay. Okay, cool. And by the way, if there's something else you wanted to say, of course, feel free. I've got time. I've always got time for you. Especially if people are being mean to you online. I'm like getting mad about it. But I just wanted to say, like, for people who maybe they're younger, maybe whatever, but they want to join into this world of crypto journalism. If you had like one piece of advice for them or one like key takeaway, whether like before they do it or like something for them to have in their pocket as they navigate this crazy world.
Yeah, it's not all a scam and a fraud. And it's not all like, the future of finance. You know what I mean? It's like, if you can come in, somewhere in between those sort of goalposts, and just like, that's where you begin your work. I think you won't just like, prevent yourself from stepping in it, but you'll also be like, I feel like you'll be able to tell better, more interesting and nuanced stories if you're aware of these two things, because I think, like, as much as we're in it every day, right? So like everything that happens kind of seems like, a story, right? But like a lot of times it's, kind of a storm in a teacup type situation. And that's what makes it also really easy for people kind of looking in, to categorize it in one way or the other, in sort of these absolute terms when, it's far from the case. And like, especially if you're at a trade publication, like, you wouldn't have very much to really talk about if you were of one camp or the other, or if you just believed it could only be these two things. It's like this total spectrum or kind of, moving target within there. Those things all happen too. There's lots of really interesting things. We know there's been tons of scams and fraud, and it's been used for money laundering. We also know that like, the SEC is updating current, securities rules to accommodate tokenization, right? Like that's pretty meaningful too, if you think about like, the impact that this could have on, traditional finance. So those are all real things that have happened, but there's also lots to be told in between.
Yeah, it's cool. Just show up and like there's honest work all the way through. It's not like you don't need to be hitting home runs every day. You just need to like get on base or not strike out too much.
Damn, you're a big baseball fan, huh, Daniel?
Yeah, I tried to hide it earlier, but here I am.
Yeah, I think we opened it with like a sort of swimming analogies, and now we're ending with baseball analogies.
Yeah, I'm all over the map.
Yeah,
I guess your question must be what?
Land and sea, land and sea.
Now we just need like an aerial.
I'm curious how this edit's going to come out. You know, if it's going to be totally unfiltered, or you know, if we just ruin this whole thing. But
I honestly think it'll be pretty true to form, to be honest. But let's see. That's over my head, to be honest. But I'm curious what question you had for me.
Well, you could, because these days, you know, you work with publications beyond crypto as well, and I'd be curious to know, just from your perspective, you know, how are they approaching the, you know, coverage of the industry, and are there any sort of common questions and themes that, you know, maybe you kind of identify among them?
Awesome question. I had this kind of started opening up for me, I guess, like a few years ago, like Consensus. I was talking to like a reporter from Bloomberg at some side event, whatever. And he told me, he was like, listen, the only thing we want to cover here is Bitcoin, Ethereum, and like Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, and quite possibly Doge, right? Like this is like back in the day when Elon Musk was talking about Doge all the time. And he's like, and by the way, the type of stories we would write, if we were to ever like incorporate someone else, like it might not be a favorable story because we're always looking for dirt. And so that has kind of changed. And now it's not just like that one random off conversation with Bloomberg. And sorry to that reporter if you're listening to this. He's not. But if he thinks that this is for me calling it random or something. But basically now the bigger publications are very, very, very engaged. And it's not always unfavorable. I know, like, I'll put it this way. If I were to get an email from like the New York Times or something a few years ago, I'd be a bit nervous.
Oh, Daniel, getting emails from the New York Times, huh?
Yeah. I got named as, and it was like, I think, by the way, the only emails I've ever gotten from them were like responses to pitches I've sent. Of course, no one from the New York Times is chasing me quite yet. But we are getting reached out to by bigger publications to ask about whether it's for sources or for whether it's for insights about stories they're already writing, or even sometimes about specific clients. But I'll say that like I think the regulation, of course, is like a big one that they're always after. Anytime there's like something going on, I know the UK was like had some big advances there in the last few months. Of course, the US, but then there's regulations, there's stable coins, which everyone cares about a lot. But then the most surprising one, I think, like, and honestly, maybe even the most active, is like market commentary. Like the publications just want to know like what's going on, what's affecting the price, like do you have any insights, forecasts, like that type of stuff. Markets reporters are like very, very, very active in the bigger publications nowadays. But yeah, I'll say even like funding news and stuff like that, like they are sometimes even just taking embargoes, press releases. It's like, it's a whole different ballgame. To me, it just signals that like crypto has made it into, like again, I know 4 or 5 years ago it was like, oh my God, we got like there's like a crypto story in a mainstream publication. Nowadays it's kind of, I'm not saying it happens every day by any means at all, but it is much less, it's less like shocking or whatever. It's become more like, oh, okay, cool. It's now within the realm of possibility. Like people actually care about it. I guess to tie into our earlier point, it makes like, it's like, let's say we're using Bloomberg as an example, then it's like, we're thinking about Bloomberg's audience. Which, by the way, I will say Bloomberg specifically is probably still the most like Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal are probably still like the most like conservative, I guess, when it comes to crypto coverage. But Wall Street Journal definitely more than Bloomberg. But yeah, I think it signals that there's like a general population that cares more about crypto than there was in. I wasn't like full time in crypto yet in 2017, but like in 2020, I know it was like a much different ballgame when talking to the Bloombergs of the world. And I'm sure in 2017, like it was even less. But nowadays it's totally commonplace. Like, well, I'm talking to those guys like almost every day. And again, it's not to say they're covering, or like it's not to say I'm actually getting a mention there every single day, but we're definitely there, which is cool.
It's good to be there, huh?
Yeah, and it's knock on wood. I mean, the thing is that it's like I tell clients this all the time. I'm like, listen, they were active 4 years ago, and then I remember I actually got like a message from Bloomberg before a conference once, because I was trying to coordinate with like one of their video production teams to like come and do coverage, and like the week before they pulled out, and they were like, sorry, Bitcoin's just like not in the headlines this week, like it's not worth it for us to come. And it was like in one of these middle E periods, if not even like downward trending periods, and that's that. But I guess in days like today, like people want to know what's going on. People definitely want to know what's going on.
I want to know what's going on. And just a shout out to your listeners, if you think there's something going on and you want to let somebody know, I want to know. Message me
I hope I'm pointing in the right direction.
at liam@dlnews.com. I'm also on Signal at Liam_66. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Liam_66 on Signal. I'm gonna message you there. It'll be the only two people I message on Signal will then be you and actually a reporter from Bloomberg.
Yeah.
So that'll be good.
Groovy.
Wow. Liam, thank you so much for taking the time. You've been wonderful.
No, thank you, Daniel.
Stop it.
Okay.
It was nothing. No, I'm teasing.
It was
great
everything.
time as always. And hopefully we can do this again sometime. You've been a great sport. And
Sports. Back in sports, huh?
sports. Yeah.
I would like to make one quick correction. It's Liam_Kelly, my full name, .66. So that's
on Signal.
That's on Signal.
Liam_Kelly.66 at
And
Signal.
but I won't be giving you, Daniel, specifically my home address for obvious reasons. You're a big weird guy. I don't want you near my son.
I was this close.
Trust me, you weren't even that close. You weren't that close.
Cool. Well, I'll continue on my journey to getting your home address.
I'll be ready.